This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.
Welcome back to talking about the best, the worst, the most overrated movie critics. I'm your host, Cam Soley, and here I am with partner in crime, John Mark. Welcome.
Always glad to be here.
So we just thought we'd just kind of just do a quick dive into just some critics that we kind of stand by, and ones that are kind of overhyped, and others that should have never gotten into the industry. They were just entertainment tools, and somehow someone said, well, you know so much about movies, wink wink, you might as well just have you bash a giant blockbuster or praise an Oscar bait movie. So we're going to get into many and just give a brief reason why they do or do not appeal. So I will quickly get into, obviously, one that is an instant punching bag or praise is Roger Ebert. And I think for the most part, I always just never had to deal with him because it just felt so authentic, whatever he was saying. It was like, okay, I like these Fast and Furious movies. They're Sunday morning entertainment. And there would be other times where he really did not like sequels. He's just like, hey, no matter how you put it, it's just too much for its own good. It's well-worn territory. And I still to this day do not understand why people act like he hated certain kinds of movies. Like, people will look at him hating Jean-Claude Van Damme movies and act like he doesn't like action movies. It's like, no, he likes plenty of Clint Eastwood, Steven Seagal, John Wayne, or Wesley Snipes, or Schwarzenegger type
even The Rock. He enjoyed The Rock, folks.
He loves The Rock type movies.
He even wrote the essay for the Criterion Collection for The Rock, so that should tell you something.
There you go. Yeah, the movie with Sean Connery, and there's plenty of Connery outings he likes. He even a movie that he felt got overstayed its welcome, he was always looking at the psychologicalness of it as opposed to whether or not there were too many explosions like most critics seem to do, or there'd be even times where he would even confess, is like, this movie isn't as bad as the one that I wrote, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. So it's just like, okay, so he's pretty self-aware of who he is. And I know he really liked Will Smith, and, and talk about some of his various movies like Enemy of the State, I Think I Am Legend, but I really don't understand the whole he hates horror. He's like, yes, he hated a lot of the trashy ones. Halloween's like the only movie by John Carpenter he really liked, just because of the score and the feel. And then there were, I think he was okay with The Fog, but he just didn't care for a lot of the other non-Escape from New York type movies he did. And I think he just didn't like anything that didn't serve any real purpose. So like, he'd like something like Scream, or Gremlins, but he wouldn't like something like, again, a Friday the 13th type movie where he's like, what is the point?
It's weird because with Scream 2, he actually preferred over the original. That's one of the few sequels he does enjoy.
Oh yeah, and I mean, he was with Jurassic Park, and
Yeah.
I think the other problem is because he was working with the pretentious Gene Siskel, and Siskel just seemed to hate anything that just wasn't a 40s kind of inspired movie, and then he was just like, hey, people are doing something new and original and groundbreaking, and he was often just taken aback. Like, you could just tell he's always just sucked into just the actors' performances and how affectionate or moody or depressed they come across on screen. And I was like, see, so he's actually, and he would sometimes fess up. Like he said he had to see Unforgiven twice. And in all fairness, there are some people who unfortunately find that movie overrated or didn't get it right away. But I loved how he just fessed up. It's like, yeah, I saw it at the festival, and then I saw it when it came out, and I understand it better. And this is a atypical kind of Western, and I got to give it props just for that. I'm like, so interesting. So, and
he even did that with Alien as well. That's one that he didn't care for when it first came out, but then he ended up rewatching it over the years, and that eventually became one of his favorite films.
No, there you go. And he that's like one of the few times he broke his rule, because there were other times where people were like, why'd you give a 3 out of 4-star review to The Godfather? He's like, because I think that's what it's deserved. I might rate it higher now, but I need to keep it for historical sake. Just here's my initial thought on whatever movie. And he even got into, I think he just became the target of video game creators when he did the whole video games will never become, as pure as film. And I'm like, well, so again, this was years before motion capture, post Avatar.
Yeah.
Call of Duty type games were coming out with a giant involving story. But in all fairness, while they are very intriguing, I think he's just at the end of the day just saying it's not the same format as a movie. Now, could he have worded that better? Sure. And
well, yeah.
I never understood how stupid comedians like Rob Schneider wanted to instantly like verbally kickbox with him, and he had to just kind of just be very playful. It's like, you were saying this, I did give your movie a fair rating. I don't find it funny, all these awful movies you're making. So it was interesting how he just kind of had to just say, hey, just doing my job, not here to slant you, just do not care for your movies.
That's true. I mean, hell, he even wrote his own book.
He's written so many books. I hated this movie.
Yep, that's what I was going to mention.
And at least he invests comedy into it.
Even if it's ones I disagree with, which of course you're going to with the movies that you like.
Oh yeah, like during Armageddon, he's like, I wanted to escape this movie, and then there's other ones which is
Rising was another one he vehemently hated.
A lot of people hated it. It's funny how they liked The Mummy a year later, and it's kind of interesting how many filmmakers who warm up, he was just kind of like, he never really even made it personally. Like, so many filmmakers will often just assume that everyone credited on screen is who they're supposed to be responding to, and he just kind of just more, this has good intentions, but it just, it wears off. It runs out of time with its pace. Mm-hmm. And he often would just commend actors who really own the role. And I just thought that was admirable, because everyone else likes to just start off with just, rejection. This movie is garbage. And he wanted to just see the passion that did merit a lot of entertainment on screen before just saying, yeah, but it's a missed opportunity, or it just wears out its welcome. And I like Peter Travers, and he would often just he was just one of those, he never really got into superhero stuff and everything. And I saw some people piling on him for a while, and he was just like, no, but when you take away the visuals, there is emptiness. So he didn't like some of James Cameron's, overdone passionate projects. He really hated Watchmen. I just was down with totally. And I just was down with, I just don't understand how Rolling Stone has almost shafted him recently, like just kind of given him a step down on their, and I think it's just because the Koch brothers bought it and restructured everything with new management. But I'm just like, that dude has been working for quite a while. That's kind of a lame way to just throw him away. And I didn't even know he had a 2 a.m. review show. I would have totally watched it, but
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, there you go.
Another critic I grew up with this because I used to get his books all the time from the library or even like the bookstore, which is Linda Moulton. Who,
yeah,
I know some either love him or hate him, because there are some films he does give his famous bomb rating.
They made fun of him on Mystery Science Theater. You gave Unforgiven a 2 out of 4, and you gave Laser Blast a better, higher review. And then he appears on himself like later for the Gorgo episode, and that's just kind of him just hamming it up. I just already knew about him even before I knew that he was a critic, just because he would appear on home video media for like Little Rascals and Three Stooges. So he just was always kind of hosting retrospects on AMC. And so I was like, everyone kind of knew who he was, even if no one was doing an impression of him.
He was willing to make fun of himself because even Gremlins 2, he makes an appearance. But
yeah, I forgot about that. So I kind of find him overhyped, but I don't hate him per se.
No.
I'm just kind of like, okay, well, I don't even know where you're going with this, but then there's other ones that I'm surprised he even liked. Like he had like he always updates his books and reviews like every year. I don't even know how he makes any money at it, but he does. And he apparently really liked Badass, describing it as a mix of Death Wish and Gran Torino, the Danny Trejo movie. And I was like, well, I didn't expect you to like that one, but okay. And Michael Phillips was another one who was kind of doing some contributions to Chicago Tribune, but he just seemed to just kind of just find everything just, didn't even try or bigoted. Like when they started filling in for Ebert, that's where it annoyed me. And it's like at least when they got comedians like Aisha Tyler, they were just fun. They're having fun and joking about what stupid movie they had seen, like The Wicker Man.
Even like Kevin Smith was able to have fun with that when he came on the one time.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. Because for whatever reason, they just started. It's like the funnier you were, the more they wanted you to just do a guest review. And it's like, well, to me, I can't blame them. And at the same time, it sometimes just seemed like a ratings grab, or
that's true.
Just because I was the first person available. I know other people also kind of bash A.O. Scott, and I have never had an issue with him. I stopped reading the Wall Street Journal, but that was for political reasons. That wasn't for, I always found the entertainment section very intriguing. Sometimes he would kind of, if there was a vague review, it often wasn't really by him. It was by someone else. And I was just like, so basically it sounds like you just walked out of the movie after a while because you lost interest, because I don't know what there's no star rating, so I can't determine what you're going for. Sometimes Entertainment Weekly could be fun, but other times it was just like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? And I always appreciated Scott's just viewpoints on, again, he's kind of looking at how figurative the movie is with what it's trying to say or do. And I know he's another one who I think he did not like the first Avengers and some of the other kind of giant spectacles. And he was just like, hey, I'm just being honest. By the time I got interested, and they start blowing shit up, I'm kind of already was just looking at my watch. James Berardinelli, speaking of which, is another one on Real Views who I really do dig. And he was the same way. Often he would just, and he's like maybe the only one who I can think of who likes all the Star Wars and Terminator movies. I am not even kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's all about just, he has to feel something. And so, yes, he often would not even bother with something like the Expendables or Transformers. And he likes some of the Avengers, but he was all about just, does it feel like an episode of TV versus this or that? But he would even, on a movie, he would give like essentially what is a 5 out of 10 star review for, he would still kind of essentially say, you gotta admire a bad guy who's willing to do, do the unthinkable, what, like kill kids or just, smile while he's dispatching various people. And I think he was just interesting in that he really was just all about is like, here's the deal. It's just like this movie wants to be this, and I think it could be like this. So I was like, okay, so he's at least being very helpful. And I more often than not, even if I just absolutely hated a certain art house movie he was in, I never felt like he was a sellout.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, Real Reviews. And then there was David Neusser of Real Film Reviews, not to be confused. And he never held back. I don't know if he's like Israeli or whatever, but he absolutely, like, if he did not like a Dogma 95 style movie or a festival film, he would give it a half-star review. I know he gave a half-star review to Pacific Rim. He was like, there's nothing in this to relate to on an anime or sci-fi mayhem, and he would even give giant star reviews to giant blockbuster movies like Prometheus, Salt, or Street Kings, and just say, hey, for all its flaws, the third half really does make it up. And I know he liked the first Expendables, and he would even occasionally review some TV. And I was like, he would even review direct-to-video movies on occasion, saying, hey, this should appeal to those looking for a Sunday night movie.
Well, at least he's not completely trashing people who watch those type of films. At least.
Yeah, and I would see some people, when I would share a review, they'd be like, oh, why is he using that certain grammar? I'm like, can you not detect the passion in here? I'm not detecting a snob who's just, saying whatever just to make the word count.
No, it sounds like he is passionate about that. And even if he doesn't understand the film, he'll at least try to find something.
Oh, totally.
We'll return after these messages.
If you like small-town mystery, crazy news, and wild history, then the Florida Men on Florida Man podcast is for you. Each week, Josh Mills and Wayne McCarty bring you the absolute best Florida has to offer. So if you're looking for a show that's safe for the family, but funny enough to help you escape everyday life, then listen to the Florida Men on Florida Man podcast. That's Florida Men, plural, on Florida Man podcast.
Hey, it's Brent Pope, the host of Breakfast with Brent Pope. You've seen me on some of your favorite TV shows saying things like, give it up, Jimmy, you gotta sink this putt to win. On Breakfast with Brent Pope, I sit down with guests from the entertainment world and we do it all over breakfast. Or should I say Brentfast? Every week on Brentfast, you get inside Hollywood info and tips, great breakfast wrecks and foodie debates. Most of all, you get the most delightful 30 minutes of your week. So dig in, it's Brentfast time. Listen at Brentfast.com, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found.
The Jacked Up Review Show podcast is honored to be part of the Blind Knowledge Podcast Network. Join anytime, talk the talk, and enjoy yourselves. There's something enlightening for everyone with this crowd of cool cats. Check them out.
So shout out to Matt Poirier, the direct-to-video connoisseur, Mitch Lavelle of The Video Vacuum, and obviously Ty and Brett, the brothers of Comeuppance Reviews. There's even a few other people on Blu-ray.com, and Ryan Onodark, I think is his name, and he just pisses me off just because he just instantly just assumes that because people who are past their prime should not be working. I'm just like, do you hear yourself? You are, at least on some of the guys who would do stuff like DVD Talk or one of those other kind of Real Film or even The Guardian, is like, okay, you might not agree with them, but at least they're not trying to resort to the usual cliches. And
At least not very cynical like this guy is.
very cynical. And he was often, for whatever reason, handed a lot of the video on demand kind of movies, and I was just like, well, those aren't your market anyway, so do you just hate your life right now? Because it's just sounding like the passion has just been stolen from your computer and your soul is evaporating.
I just request do other types of films, not just those.
Yeah.
Why had to be stuck with that? If you don't like it, move on to something else. It can't be that hard.
Totally. Another one who's often lampooned due to his political affiliations, which sucks because I kind of found him funny, was Kyle Smith. Used to write for the New York Post, and unfortunately, I think he's contributing to Breitbart and a bunch of those other garbage sites. But he was interesting in that he would straight up he hated art house movies. So he would lampoon something that he found laughable, like Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master. I know when he gave a positive review in freaking A Million Ways to Die in the West for Seth MacFarlane, he's like, this is the best comedy of the year, along with Noah. Just making it clear that he really fucking hated Noah, but it's a great comedy. I'm like, I can actually get behind that because that movie's CGI and confused messaging. Why would you have an atheist filmmaker make a religious movie? It doesn't make any sense.
Somehow managed to boil you to tears.
Yeah. I know you hate this guy, Mark Kermode.
That's somebody that
I don't know what UK paper he's for. Is it the It's not the Guardian. It's
I
like,
don't think it's the Guardian. I think it's what was it?
either way, he pisses me off, and
He's
I
someone to enjoy, but
I used to kind of like his messaging, but yeah, aside from liking or hating Michael Bay, is you just look at all his comments on IMDb. Like, he did a shitty like docudrama with William Friedkin of The Exorcist because he's like apparently a religious nutcase, and then he's like on record as saying, calling movies like We're the Millers, lowest common denominator, crass, stupid humor. Watching documentary movies, even just beating up on other stuff and just saying just random stuff is like, are you just saying anything just to, again, make the word count? Like on Riddick, it thinks it's quite funny. And that's the really annoying thing. I'm like, it's not trying to be funny last I checked, but okay. Even stupid movies like AI, artificial intelligence, he wants to defend, and then Sex and the City 2, he's like, my expectations were low and I would say they were met. I'm like, what? Okay. I don't think anyone was thinking it was going to be worse, but
he's one that, like I said, it used to be kind of fun watching his reviews, but over time, it's gradually start to go downhill quick.
Yeah.
Which,
and I can't respect anyone who wants to praise the Twilight movies. It's just like, no.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
He is a huge fan, Mr. Commode, and he defends them. And I'm just like, do you hear yourself? Is Lionsgate giving you extra money? What's going on here? Because it's just like
anything to praise about those films, but it's reached a man.
Yes.
Like, you go out to Bay for what he does, but yet you give Twilight a pass. Like, explain that to me. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
But then he has just even generic reviews when it's like even a positive review for like The Martian. He's like, I really enjoyed it so much that I would have to sit down and watch the whole thing from the beginning immediately afterwards. It's just like, why not just say I will be revisiting it because it is an important movie or something like that?
It's just strange writing that he does sometimes.
He's pretty much a troll. Rex Reed's another one who's hated on, but truth be told, I think he's just an old school guy, even though it's very clear that he definitely walked out of some movies he did not like.
Yeah.
I think he just gets hated on because he pretty much hates all modern day horror movies and superhero stuff. He's an old school guy. He prefers seeing something like Superman Fly for the Sky, or, I mean, you look at a lot of the movies he likes a lot of very independent cinema. Like, he liked this one movie called like Knife Fight, which was like a political thriller movie about a congressman running for office with Julia Bowen from Modern Family and Rob Lowe. And it was like, I thought it was good, but it didn't get seen by many people. But yeah, it's just like, I at least, even if you don't want to call it merit, I at least see what he's going for versus, again, Kermode, who just, like, he talks about Robert Zemeckis' Allied, saying, they're kind of making these references to Casablanca. It's like, what do you mean, kind of? They absolutely are. And then just starts making nonstop comparisons to all the various movies. It's like, I guess you really think you're really smart.
Yeah.
Where are you going with it, though? And so I put him up there with Harry Knowles. That's right. Of Joe Blow, Ain't It Cool? I didn't know he was a douchebag, but apparently he's an absolute misogynist. And it's just so weird because I would read him for a while. He seemed to just basically like everything. So it's like a lot of geeks kind of felt like they had a voice on the internet. So kudos to that. But much like politics, for all the good you do, there's a lot of bad you do as well. And I'm just like, yeah, I had no idea this is what a blind culture we were in at the time. I had no idea he made so many homophobic or, again, just fucked up references to women, and then eventually had to step down while silently step back up. I'm just like, there were times where basically Guillermo del Toro liked him because he started getting a lot of his work promoted through him. Like, he absolutely wanted to know what he thought on the premiere of Blade 2, and that's a review that, for whatever reason, keeps resurfacing on various critic sites. And Robert Rodriguez was clamoring to him, and it's like, okay, so the cult filmmakers liked him, but in all fairness, they didn't know what a monster or a dickhead he was. He's even interviewed, like, for the making of The Expendables. I'm like, why did they interview him? Oh, that's right, because he's totally the audience for this. But
Yeah, that was strange seeing him there for some reason.
yeah, it's like, I don't think he's really anyone I take seriously or with any merit. He's not really a geek who I find very funny. And I guess I'll just get on to Gene Siskel and Richard Roper. It's just, no matter who was Ebert's wingman, Siskel pissed me off because he just, even on a rare occasion that I did agree with him, it just seemed like he was just being a killjoy. Like, he just hated just all kinds of movies and didn't know how to describe them. And then Richard Roper was just so indecisive and inconsistent. Like, he likes movies like The Punisher, and he's another one who just basically wants to lampoon any geezer who's getting up there like Clint Eastwood or Stallone, but then he'll give like a 5-star review to like a Godzilla movie or Pacific Rim. And it's just like, I remember he absolutely hated movies like Training Day, and it's just like, okay, but he wouldn't even give an actual excuse. He's like, oh, this is just so just wrong. And it's just like, why is it wrong? I think you can elaborate. You're a critic.
At least I can say with Cisco in his later years that there are some films where he surprised me with, like with some actors he wasn't nominated for Oscars. Like
in the T2 review, he's like, I did not care for the first movie, but I am required to see this movie, and I really liked it despite not liking Schwarzenegger. It's like, okay, point made, but it seems like, again, he just couldn't separate a certain persona, and he just was very indistinct at describing why he hated the celebrity. It's like, really?
Yeah. Although, like I
In the
said,
Falling Down review, he's acting like, oh, this is... It's like he's instantly comparing it with all the death wishes of the world, and Ebert's like, we've never seen anything like this before. A cop on the verge of retirement trying to stop a madman who doesn't think he's mad. And couldn't really open any discussion panel with him.
he was strange with some that, like him, like loving vampires for James Woods, and came into hands with The Mask, which he wanted nominated for Oscars, which was an interesting thing to hear. But you're like, why them of all people?
Of all people, yeah.
Granted, I like the performances, but still, it's
no real concise. Like, even movies that are often lampooned, that are often hated on, Ebert would just flat out say, is like, I really find this movie very intriguing and funny, and so he would give a 3 out of 4 to something like, again, Congo, or again, just something that might be a Vin Diesel or The Rock beat him up. You know, it's just, he was always kind of looking at, he had to just kind of really be intrigued, and it just couldn't wear out its welcome. He varied on the James Bond movies. I know in fact, Ebert really especially loved License to Kill, and it's like, and so it is funny seeing he really even loved some of the often hated Bond movies, like the last 2 Brosnan ones. So I found that interesting, because Ebert's kind of set for life too, in that he just wants everyone to just really be having fun. And he would even kind of self-admit, is like, I'm not gonna lie, those stunts by Jackie Chan or those very beautiful women are worth a matinee. He would not hold back.
now he'd be honest.
To be honest, it's, I guess you could even, so I guess we can go on to internet reviewers. Some of the bigger YouTubers that have been here for a while are Jeremy Johns and Chris Stuckman.
Oh yeah.
And the Angry Video Game Nerd.
Jeremy Johns one I never really watched.
He seemed like he was hot for a minute, but he was like too clever for his own good. And Olympus Has Fallen comes out and he's like, wait a minute, didn't they already do that in season 7 of 24? I'm like, ah ha ha. And after a while, it just seemed like, I don't know, he just kind of wanted to lead into the camera and just kind of, I got a little bit of narcissism from him, and that was just the general vibe. I don't know that that's for sure, but it also kind of, I haven't really seen him in a while, so I can't really elaborate on what he's been doing recently. Chris Stuckman, like we said before we started up, he seemed like he was just kind of all about just give a very dry and just very blunt review, and sometimes it worked and other times it just seemed like it was a little too much.
Yeah, I know sometimes where he would be a little too harsh on certain films, or he'll defend certain films which are baffling to me. Like most recently, The Empty Man, he tries to defend, which I still understand to this day. But
Well, there you go.
and then another one I mentioned before we started was Grace Randolph, who I know a lot of people don't care for her too much. And that's mostly because she's one of those critics that likes to basically stand with certain companies like Marvel or DC at times. And, well, another thing that hurts her is she claims that she has sources with certain people about certain film projects, which turn out to be wrong most of the time.
So basically, she's some hack from Comic Book Movie, basically.
Yeah.
Just making rumors.
That's usually how she is. And she always go after two certain actors, Jessica Chastain, Henry Cavill, claiming that, oh, people in Hollywood hate them, but yet them.
How is that possible?
I
Their
know.
movies always sell out. So
Yet, and that's why I told you before we started that Chastain is especially one that she has some type of grudge against for some reason. I'm not sure if she still does, but I know when I started watching her a little bit, that's the one person she always goes after. And she always said that's what ruins a movie. So she shows up, which I'm like,
that's just childish.
I'm like, that's just childish, immature. And it's like, well, what's your deal with her?
At least online critic Decker Shadow just works comedy, and pretty much I know everyone was always going crazy about that guy with glasses. I grew tired of that and the cinema snob after a while, and I loved Decker Shadow because he would often just kind of, he wouldn't act like every movie was beyond disdain or, you know, potential. And when he goes after Seagal movies, he really hates Seagal movies, but he's really just going after them because they, you know, the movies are confusing or it just pissed him off, and he just works just natural comedy into it. And I mean, he gives positive reviews to all the diehards, but he's just looking at it from kind of a thinking man's kind of action viewpoint. And I love how he just doesn't try to separate an audience or even do name calling. Like, if you don't like this, you must be a this, you know, mindset. And, you know, it's more than I can say for pricks like Armin White, who's, you know, been working at the National Review, and he'll claim that certain filmmakers are like Sam Peckinpah just because they got gory violence on screen. And it sucks because he hates on a lot of superhero movies, but often it's just because he doesn't like that they're the progressive material in it. Is like, no, bullshit. You should be hating on it because, you know, set design, visual effects, or plotting, and you clearly got an agenda and he's like a black Republican dude, and he's just like absolutely like just seems to hate anything just because it's positive and well thought out. And I can say the same thing about Slate magazine as well as Slant. Like both those guys. I mean, I don't know why you would take them seriously since they're both going to basically do just that, kind of give a snobby post about something. But
kind of sounds like one critic that I could never stand, which was Alonso Duralde from The Wrap, who always seemed very cynical with his reviews, and he would always go after certain action films.
I found way more fun just reading Vulture, and Vulture would be honest, just like, hey, this is a B grade movie, but it's a still a decent Saturday matinee, you know, and they would sometimes be some of the only ones who you saw giving positive reviews to disaster movies or video game movies. So it sucked too when sometimes on a rare convenience I would see a positive review for a negative movie or vice versa, you know, a negative review for a positive movie by the San Francisco Chronicle. But it would suck because while I kind of agreed with their stance, I still didn't agree with how they worded it. It'd be like, so whenever I see the reviews, it seems like, much like Armand White, they just wanted to predict if someone would like a movie. Like Armand White would do the whole Clash of the Titans has more life in it than something like Gladiator or Lord of the Rings. I'm like, why are you comparing these sword and sandal movies that nothing even remotely like? And then you see idiots like Chronicle will do kind of like, is like, okay, so Battlefield Earth is a technically, a goofy Star Trek Planet of the Apes movie. I still don't know why you gave it a positive review. Waterworld, I think they gave a blessing to as well for some reason, which is just even more bizarre for people who do or do not like that movie. It's like, what do you make of it? And you know, I know they hated Mad Max Fury Road, and I know you and I are some of the few who can't stand certain apocalyptic movies that are boring and nothing mindless action. But his is weird in that he just goes, it's just not all it is meant to be. I'm like, you can build on that. So these guys just have been around way too long to where they just kind of just say whatever is there and that's what gets printed. And you just kind of wish an editor could kind of come in and just say, hey, can you give me a little more substance here? What does that mean?
Yeah. Wish somebody would do that, because that would actually help the site.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are still going to CinemaSins and using that as a movie talking point, and it's really not. And I get already annoyed enough by Red Letter Media just because it seemed like, again, like or hate the Star Wars prequels, it seems like they were only big because of that, and I could never get through any of their reviews because they were just so wanting to put on different personas. Everything had to be like 50 hours, you know, it's just like multiple hours. And just I even hated their Star Trek reviews because it just seemed like they just wanted to have a back and forth thing where one of them is pretending to be a vampire who doesn't like to eat humans, and there was another guy putting on a different persona, and everyone would do the whole, but they're talking about this talking point and that talking point. I'm like, no shit. I get that the acting isn't good in Star Wars. I get that Star Trek is trying to kind of do too many different things, but it might have been worked better as an episode of TV. But I mean, even just getting to some of his other stuff and how I think he worked on a movie and it sucked. And that's more than I can say about the Angry Video Game Nerd, because the Angry Video Game Nerd pretty much, he kind of has just kind of a blunt style. But at least he'll just say, hey, I know everyone likes this movie. I personally find it a boring piece of shit. And here's why. And I mean, he even did his own movie, and that movie was campy as fuck. It was just absolutely just him making fun of, again, just kind of fighting a big boss and someone falling to their death and him having to like just run around like a madman. And he just really plays up that nerd side. And I embraced it kind of just because it was just so self-aware. Oh.
It's unfortunate. Some of those critics who just don't seem so off me.
I do think a lot of sites are kind of related to the Wrap or Entertainment Weekly, so that gets a little more awkward. So it just feels like reviews are very corporatized.
And they definitely choose their favorites for certain directors, which also annoy me, because like that's not what y'all should be doing. You should be discussing whether it has a good enough story or if the acting fits within the tone of
basically you got to be invisible, because like John Cho made Crazy Rich Asians, so now he's our heartthrob for critics. But before that, he was in some of the worst rated movies, like a Justin Bieber documentary and, you know, G.I. Joe 2. And aside from Now You See Me 2, he wasn't all that well liked. But it's like basically people have to just make like easygoing crowd pleasers, like a Pitch Perfect kind of movie or a superhero film, if they just want to be recognized in some capacity. And if they don't do a good job, no one really talks about them because everyone, for whatever reason, I don't know, they are either distracted by how outspoken the filmmaker is, like someone like a Martin Scorsese or what have you. And it just seems like, I don't know, it even when comedians are now doing reviews, they basically, it's like sometimes they have to awkwardly be serious for a minute, even though they're here to just be funny. And it's just a bizarre mashup.
Really
Trying to make too many people entertained. This was fun, just kind of doing a complex takedown. Praise. Where can we find critics like you on the interwebs?
As always, you can follow me on my Twitter and Instagram under Jonathan Mark, and catch up my review for Memory for the Action Elite coming next week. So stay tuned for that.
Stellar. Use whatever platform you got to use.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening. It's a jacked up